Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Hart for those of you that are new. And today I'll be breaking down this 9-game NBA slate here on DraftKings for Wednesday night. So I'll be doing an early look breakdown of this slate, kind of talking through the players I like, the players I don't like, kind of why, the injury news, how that all affects the slate. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. As always, stay updated with the injury news because it changes the entire slate. And you pretty much can't build a lineup until about 15 minutes before the slate starts. And obviously, there's some changes throughout where, late swap is a thing and a lot of people ignore it, but that's a huge, huge advantage in terms of like if there's star players in the later games that people don't play around the fact that they could miss. So always stay up to date with the injury news, and let's jump right into this. So starting off here, we have the Clippers versus the Wizards. Obviously, a fantastic matchup here for the Clippers. Washington's one of the few teams you really, really want to target night in and night out because they're brutal. But with that with them being brutal, comes blowout risk. So that's the only downside there. But I mean, Harden, I don't love the price tag here for Harden. 8.5K for a guy who third option, his shot attempts have been up the past, 5, 6, 7 games. But before that, he's kind of inconsistent in terms of the shot attempts. You really need him to go for a double-double, which is obviously, as you can see, he can. But I just think it's a little bit too pricey for a guy who's just a little bit too risky at that price tag. I mean, you could pay down for a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who, as you can see, he's the alpha on this team still. It's him and Paul George as the alphas. Now, their ceilings are a little bit limited with all three of them playing, but still 8.2K for Kawhi against the Wizards is really, really good. Same thing with Paul George here. I think it's obviously in terms of like safeness, Kawhi is probably the best. Then I'd say Harden, then Paul George. But we know Paul George can have huge, huge upside here, especially in this matchup. So all three look like very, very strong plays. I'd rank it Kawhi still, Paul George, and then Harden. In terms of the rest of the team, I mean, Russ has been super efficient recently, has had a few pop-off games, but the minutes have not been great, and it's just hard to trust that, even at his low price tag. Same with Norman Powell. I mean, sure, he can come off the bench, have a decent game, but at 4.6, I think this is more so just an okay, kind of okay value play, I would say. Plumlee and Daniel Tice are kind of splitting the center minutes. They're both there. I mean, they're priced relatively close to each other. I mean, it's just, you don't feel great going to them. But if you're looking for a very cheap center, I mean, they're both there. I still feel better going to Plumlee than Dice. But that's about it. Man, he's just been brutal DFS wise. I guess an okay value play, and that's really it. It's really just the main top three guys for me on the Clippers side. On the Washington side here, as always, like, if this game stays close, it's going to be because Kuzma has a pretty solid game. So he's always going to be a very low-owned contrarian option. Tyus Jones is very, very boomer bust. Had 3 solid games in a row, but as you can see, don't be surprised if he goes out there and puts up, less than 20 fancy points. As he put 16.5 here against Minnesota in a relatively close game there. So very, very inconsistent. A guy who can go out there and get you double-double upside. So it really just comes down to if this game stays close, it's going to be because of Kyle Kuzma and Tyus Jones should usually have a solid game there. So I don't mind them. Rest of the team, they're just there. I mean, Denny has some upside. Gafford, if he can stay out of foul trouble, he has upside, as you can see, the past 3 games. I mean, he's been very, very solid. So if you want to land on them, sure. I don't love it. I think I'd rather go to different places, but they are there. Poole, I mean, we always talk about him. GPP upside, it's just he's been god-awful this year. It's wild how bad that guy has been. Bagley coming off the bench here, seeing, about 20 minutes. I think he's a solid play, especially if you think a guy like Gafford, who is very foul-prone, gets into foul trouble. I mean, Paul George likes to drive. Kawhi likes to drive. Could be a lot of foul trouble risk there for Gafford. Bagley, another guy who likes to have foul trouble, but still 4.8K for him. Would allow you to be a little bit different there. I don't mind it, and that's really it. I mean, Kispert, Bilal, they're seeing some minutes, but pretty gross going down to them. Moving on to Chicago here. They're playing tonight, so it'll be a back-to-back for them, but absolutely love the price tag here for White and Vooch. They're both really, really strong plays here. Another team you always want to target is Charlotte's because they're god-awful. Missing a lot of people right now, so absolutely love Kobe and Vooch. Going to throw them in there for right now into kind of the early look player pool. DeRozan, I don't mind him as like a strong secondary option. Has a little bit more upside recently, but still 7.9K. I'd rather pay down for Vooch and Kobe White, who are way safer and have the same upside, if not even more upside compared to DeRozan. Cruz upside, I think a fine play there. Should play mid to low 30s minutes. Has upside if he hits his threes. Otherwise, he's going to be getting anywhere from like 22 to 30 fancy points, which I think is fine at 5.8K. Nothing too crazy there. In terms of other guys, Drummond's minutes have gone up a little bit recently, but 5.4K for him is not the best. Io is probably going to be the best option off the bench here, 4.6. I think he's a strong value. Has been better recently in terms of his production. So I think he's a pretty decent play there, especially with Pat Williams out. They're missing a good amount here on the Bulls team. Julian Phillips played that last game, played 23 minutes. It'll be interesting to see how much he plays tonight. But if he plays another 15 plus minutes tonight in a close game, I think he's a very strong value option. A guy who's not going to be too involved offensively, but as you can see, he did score a little bit there. And that's really it. Dalen Terry sucks. I'd rather go to Phillips over him. And the same thing with Carter. I mean, he's kind of just fallen out of the rotation. I think it's just an absolute dart throw if you want to go to him. But I think it's just stick with Io and then just go with one of the main three guys of Vooch, Kobe, and DeRozan, if not multiple. On the Charlotte side here, LaMelo is questionable. Looks like he's going to be doubtful for him to play. So that means we're probably going to get to Bridges, Miller, Washington, Richards, and Martin to start again. So if that happens, I mean, they're all too cheap here in this matchup against the Bulls. Miller was great for us last night as a core play, 45 fantasy points there. Would load up on him once again there. He kind of played the point guard role. And with that in mind, I'll get to Richards in a second, but him and Bridges going to be very, very strong plays. I mean, look at Bridges there. Going to be playing pretty much the whole game. Going to be pretty much the number one option alongside Brandon Miller. Pretty decent price tag for him at 8.2K. I think PJ Washington is a very strong play here. Coming off, really good game there, 43 fantasy points, or excuse me, 43 real life points in a loss, but played 35 minutes against the Knicks, 7-19, shot it a ton, just couldn't really hit a shot, didn't really get many rebounds, which he usually is decent with. So a lot of interest there for Washington and Bridges. And then Richards, I think he's out of play for me. Now, the minutes have been great, but with only 2 field goal attempts, I think a lot of it does have to do with them not having a true point guard. They don't have LaMelo. They didn't start Ish Smith. So I just think it's really hard for guys like Bridges and Miller to run point and get a guy like Richards involved. A lot of his offense is going to be coming from alley-oops, and those guys are just not the best at that. So I think he's an okay secondary option just because I think there's just limited upside in terms of his offense production unless he gets a bunch of rebounds or a bunch of blocks, which he can. So for that reason, I mean, he's cheap. He's going to play all the minutes he can play, especially if he stays out of foul trouble. But I just think offensively he's a little bit limited. Another great value option here. Cody Martin played 31 minutes, kind of stuffed the stat sheet. So yeah, a lot to like here for this second game. Moving on to Detroit here versus Cleveland. On the Detroit side, obviously the big news here is Cade Cunningham, which looks like he's going to be good. So with him back, it really throws a wrench in the whole offense. I mean, he's the main engine, main guy, number one option. So with him back, it really takes these other guards out of play for me, really, because even if he's on a 20, 25 minutes limit, I mean, he's going to be controlling the offense. I mean, Duran's a solid secondary option there. I mean, he's a guy who always has upside. But in terms of the guards, Ivy, 6.7K for him. I mean, he should probably still start. We'll have to see. They've been very weird with his starting lineups. But, I mean, it takes that out of play for me. I'd rather get to the other guards in his similar price tag range that have way safer minutes and way safer upside than him. Bogdan, I guess, is fine. It's not really going to affect him too much. He's always going to be aggressive. So he's an okay option, but there's not a lot of blowout risk here going against Cleveland, right? Like, Cleveland's been very hot. Detroit's been obviously god awful this season. It's hard to see them keep it close the whole game. Burks is priced up. I mean, Killian Hayes is super cheap, but he's been god awful. As you can see, there's just not a lot to like here at all on this side. Unless they start one of these random forwards, it's just pretty gross going to Detroit. On the Cleveland side, obviously, fantastic matchup. It's just, can this game stay close? If you want to be, contrarian, you could definitely get to one of these guys like Donovan Mitchell, but still, Garland should be back. They had Mobley back, who played 21 minutes, which with all of them back, it really hurts the upside of the whole team. And with that in mind, they're all just secondary options. Like, sure, you can get to a guy like Mitchell. I think he's still the best play. But with Garland back, if he's on a minutes limit, even if he's not, I mean, that price tag for him they're just all hurting each other's upside. As we saw at the beginning of the season when they all played together, it was pretty much, taking a random shot on anyone who is not Donovan Mitchell. You're usually going to get burned, but maybe once out of every 4 games, they have a solid game. So right now, they're just all there for me. I don't think there's a need to get to any of them with a fully healthy team, even a great matchup. On to Sacramento versus Miami here. For the Kings side, Sabonis, once again, is just too cheap for his ceiling there. Even if it's a slower paced, tougher matchup, Miami's been very bad recently. Fox, I think, is definitely way too cheap here at 8.7K. It doesn't really matter matchup-wise for Fox. I mean, he's just fantastic. So really, really like him. Keegan Murray is in an interesting price range as well. I mean, he should be playing all the minutes he can handle if he stays out of foul trouble. And as you can see, he does have some good upside there, even alongside Sabonis and Fox. In terms of the rest of the team here, I think Monk and Herter are fine GPP options. Their minutes kind of fluctuate really with how they're playing. Barnes is absolutely popping off after being quiet pretty much the whole season. Don't trust the upside there with him. Just riding a little bit of hot streak. I expect him to really cool off, so I'm not going to chase that. And I do think Lyles is always a very solid, risky dart throw option. For Miami here, obviously a good matchup here. Should be a little bit faster pace for them. Bam's dropped all the way down to 8,000. I mean, they've been terrible as a team, so all these guys are coming in at a very cheap price tag. So they're all very interesting, but with the addition of Rozier, it has kind of muddied up the waters offensively. And people like Jimmy have taken a backseat a little bit there, but as you can see, he's kind of stepped up the past 2 games since getting Rozier. So, I mean, Hero's not been the best. I think the safest route would be going Bam or Jimmy. And then if you want to get risky, you could definitely land on Hero or Rozier, but that's about it. I don't think there's a need to get to anyone else here. I mean, Caleb Martin should play okay minutes, but still very risky value play when there's just way safer value plays on the board today. On to Orlando here. Really like Franz, really like Paolo. With them having a fully healthy team, I mean, the offense is going to run through both of them. Kind of have limited ceilings with both of them playing, but still, they can definitely pop off. So they're strong secondary options, contrarian options. As you can see, Paolo still had a great game there alongside those guys. And then that last game against Dallas, I do think he kind of took that step with Franz missing, was it like a month? Paolo, I mean, pretty much became the sole offense on this team. Absolute beast, pretty much an all-star with how he is playing. I expect him to continue that, to have a little bit more of the, a share offensively for him to hold that compared to Franz. So I do think, obviously, he's more expensive, but I do think Paolo's a pretty strong secondary option on this slate for tomorrow that no one's going to get to. I think Franz is definitely decent, especially with this matchup against the Spurs. Another one of those matchups you always want to target. Wendell is going to be that GPP risky play. The minutes should be there if he stays out of foul trouble. And he's been pretty productive, as you can see here, 34, 39, 33, 26, 42. So he has good upside going against Victor, so they're going to need his size. I think he's a very interesting play there at 6.1. In terms of the rest of the team here, Fultz's minutes have been ticking up, so he's always an option in GPPs. Same thing, Cole Anthony. I mean, they're back to that normal where it's like you take a shot on one of the guards, and the other 2 are going to go off. So they're there, and that's really it. Moving on to the Spurs side here, obviously Victor priced up, but we know the upside that he brings here, even in limited minutes, even though they've been slowly ticking up a little bit here. In terms of the rest of the team, Vassal's an okay secondary option. Same thing, Keldon Johnson. I mean, nothing too crazy here. If he misses, maybe we could get some value in terms of a guy like, Champagne, maybe even a guy like Osman getting some more run, who had a solid game there last game for them. But otherwise, it's just a very gross team that's all kind of priced about right. Don't love it in a very tough defensive matchup against Orlando. Keep that in mind there. Orlando's really, really good defensively, so it should be a struggle for the Spurs to score offensively. Going to be a pretty gross game for them. Moving on to Denver here versus OKC. Should be a fantastic game to watch. Jokic is questionable. I think he should be good to go. But obviously keep that in mind. We could definitely get some great value here on some of these Denver guys. Because if he misses, we're going to want to load up in pretty much all 3 of Murray, Porter Jr., and Gordon, and possibly even, DeAndre Jordan if he starts. I mean, it's pretty much loading up in the whole 4 to 5 starters. It's what we'd want to do, just because Murray's going to, they're all going to shoulder huge loads offensively. Should be more rebounding opportunities for a guy like Gordon, ball in his hands more. So you're going to want to load up on all those guys. That'll be the optimal way. If there's no Jokic, now if there's Jokic, I think Jamal Murray still looks like a fantastic option. Same thing with MPJ. I mean, these guys are definitely cheap price tags, Gordon and MPJ. So a lot of interest there for me. And even Jokic, I mean, 11.3, who's going to stop him? Chet. They're going to have to double team him should these guys open. So a lot to like here for this Denver side. Moving on to the OKC side. A few question marks. Jalen Williams will not play because of the ankle. Holmgren is questionable. And same thing with SGA, who is questionable with the illness. Now, if Holmgren or SGA miss, or both of them miss, obviously there's massive blowout risk. It really takes those Denver guys pretty much out of contention for me, because they're going to be going up against, Giddey, Dort, Wallace, Wiggins, like Poku. So it could be good, good value for us on the OKC side, but obviously would ruin this entire game in the game script. So a lot to digest here. It's more so we have to wait and see. We'll probably get the news midday. OKC has been good about their news, so hopefully we get that. Otherwise, I'll have a breakdown on my Twitter later tomorrow. Moving on to Dallas here versus Minnesota. On the Dallas side, no Luca, no Hardaway, or excuse me, no Luca, no Kyrie Irving. Lively's out as well. So we're going to get a bunch of G League players starting for Dallas, which is very annoying. The best option is probably going to be Hardy, but he's been terrible this year in his spot starts. The next best offensive player would it's probably going to be one of these guys down here. I mean, Hardaway Jr., sure, you can go to him. He's going to shoot the ball 25 times, but are they going to keep it close against one of the best teams in the NBA in Minnesota? I don't know. I just don't think it will happen. So the best options are going to be Hardy, Green, and then taking a shot on one of these cheaper guys like a Lawson, like maybe even a Greg Brown, Prosper maybe. So I think it's kind of wait and see what we get with the starting lineup, but that's going to probably be the best route in terms of building your lineup. Those cheap guys, they should see a lot of run against Minnesota here. And then obviously on Minnesota, great price tags for Towns and Gobert, who we want to target, but still you're running that risk of like, can Dallas keep it close enough for these guys to go off and pay off the price tags? I think it's a good risk reward situation here. A lot of people will kind of build that route, I do think. But if not, that can be one way you get different if you want to go that route of playing with the Dallas guys and the Dallas, cheap Dallas guys. Moving on to the Pelicans here. I mean, once again, it seems like soft pricing across the board for these 3 stars, but with all 3 of them playing, they all kind of have limited upside playing alongside each other. As I always say, I think Ingram's probably the best in terms of ceiling. Zion's probably, I always flip-flop, but I do think it's probably the safest in terms of him getting like 20 plus points. Not always with the rebounds and assists this season, but 20 plus points, he'll probably get that. And then CJ is probably the safest in terms of obviously assists, rebounds, and points. But obviously, he has not been the best scoring the ball recently. I don't think there's a need to get to any of these guys, even if they're cheap price tags, because we could definitely go cheap in terms of, getting to the Mavericks guys, getting to the Denver guys, possibly there. Even the Minnesota guys, it's like these guys just fall in an awkward price range where it's like if you're looking to get different, sure, you can land on them. But otherwise, I don't think there's a need to get to them. On Houston here, they're all priced about right. Nothing really stands out to me personally. I mean, Cam Whitmore has been playing really, really solid. As you can see, he's been popping off, kind of in that Tari Eason role where he comes off the bench. Minutes are kind of a little bit all over the board, but he's been absolutely smashing in a small amount of time. Hard to trust that production, but if you want to get super risky, you can go there. I don't suggest it, especially with all the value that'll be open on the slate tomorrow, especially if OKC, those guys rest. I mean, we're going to get like 3 teams possibly with a bunch of G League starters playing. So a lot to look forward to tomorrow in terms of value. So I definitely think it's like a stars and scrubs slate. And then moving on, and then if you want to get different, I'd say go to the mid-range build because there's a lot to like in terms of the mid-range build. As you can see here, a lot of people in that 6 to 7K range that look great for tomorrow. And then for Phoenix here, Booker has been unreal the past 3 games, averaging like 55 points per game. 46, 62, 44. Obviously, the last game, shot 23 times, only scored 22 points. But he's been really solid. KD, I think, is still probably the safest and my favorite. Beal is there. Once again, I just don't think he's a great play in that 6K range. A lot more to like a Brandon Miller, paying up for a guy like Kobe White. I just don't think there's a need to get to Beal. Nurkic is always an interesting GPP option at center, and that's really it for the rest of the team. Not much to like there. Eubanks, if you're looking for a cheap center, who's okay, but don't think there's a need to get to him. And then for Brooklyn, a team that's just been terrible this year. Gross to watch. Ben Simmons is back, played 18 minutes, was really good there. As you can see, almost put up a triple-double in 18 minutes. But with being on the minutes limit, I mean, he's really hindered offensively, not the best. I think the only guy I would have interest in would be Cam Thomas if he still starts, and then obviously Mikal Bridges. Otherwise, I don't think there's a need to get to anyone on this team. Dinwiddie's been god-awful. Their bigs, like DFS has been terrible. Worse than just all the way down there. It's a very risky team. I don't think there's any risk reward going to any of them, especially when we have, Chicago and Charlotte, that game there. We have Denver versus OKC game. That's a great game to target there because we could get value on the OKC side. Dallas, Minnesota. Obviously, Dallas, they're missing the whole team. There's going to be a ton of G League starters in that game. And then with the, I think there was one more team as I'm missing. I think that was it. But still, as you guys can see, there's a lot to like here in the mid-range. Once again, I do think the stars and scrubs build will probably be the most popular. people will probably jam in Jokic if he's good to go. And if there is chat in SGA, Jokic, Sabonis, or Jokic, SGA, it's probably going to be the two most popular people to jam in tomorrow. Probably Victor as well, but still, I think it's people going to be jamming in Jokic and SGA, and then filling in with the Spurs, or should I say the Mavs value and the Charlotte value. And it's hard not to deny that route for tomorrow. So if you guys like the video, hit that like button. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.